Hi everyone, welcome to Thinking Green with Caillou and Emily. In this module, we'll be talking about environmental issues and solutions generally and specific to the city of Pittsburgh, where the Leonard Gelfand Center is located.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Caillou.
And I'm a senior at Carnegie Mellon University studying civil and environmental engineering with an additional major in engineering and public policy, and I'm from New York.
And I'm a sophomore also at Carnegie Mellon studying international relations and politics, and I'm from Arizona.
So before we start this module, we want to know what you already know about the environment. So on the handout that says Thinking Green at the top, take a minute to write down a few things you already know and pause this video while you do that.
So I know we're both really excited about this module and what students can learn. What are you excited about in specific?
I'm really excited for students to learn about environmental issues that are specific to where they live, especially if they're from Pittsburgh.
On that same handout, write down what you want to learn about the environment and one question you have about the environment.
And we're excited to see you in the next video where I'll be giving an introduction to the environment and the topics that we're going to be covering over the next couple videos. And we're excited to see you there.
See you soon.
So today we're going to start off by talking about weather when we're talking about the environment. So we're going to introduce some of the topics that we're going to be discussing for the rest of this module. So we're really excited to have you here. So to get started, we're going to talk about what you already know about weather. So let's get out our worksheet that is titled Intro to the Environment. And then taking a look at question 1, it's going to ask you to name as many different types of weather as you can. Okay. So when you're ready, pause the video for 1 minute and write down as many answers as you can. Ready, set, go. Okay, I hope you had time to pause the video and write down as many different types of weather as you could think of. On this slide, we have the official list from many of the different storm watching stations around the country, and this is their official list of different types of weather. So take a look at this list, compare it to the list you have, and if there's any different types of weather that you don't know what they are, take this time to pause the video, look it up online. I think that's a great way to learn more. But Emily, as you were writing down some different types of weather, what did you come up with?
So since I'm from New York, Caillou, I thought of snow, rain, and I also thought of hurricanes, because sometimes in the summer we get hurricanes out in New York. What about you?
Wow, that's scary. So being from Arizona, I thought of, really hot, dry weather, and sometimes we even get these really scary sandstorms.
Oh my goodness.
So now we're going to be talking about how the weather affects your environment. For now, you're going to take your worksheet back out and you're going to brainstorm in question number 2, how you think that weather affects your personal environment. So your environment is really everything around you. It's the air you breathe, it's the animals that you see, it's the dirt you stand on. So you're going to look that up and you're going to fill out that question. And again, for 1 minute, just write down as many answers as you can think of. Okay, so when I answered this question, I thought about how the Grand Canyon was formed, which is one of the 7 natural wonders, which is found here in Arizona. And it was created through erosion. Erosion is the process where either wind or water or both tear down and strip rock away from a natural environment. And that's how the Grand Canyon was formed, as a combination of both mostly water, but also wind created the Grand Canyon, which I think is really cool and something really exciting to see. Another thing I thought of is it being really hot makes Arizona really prone to droughts. So in Arizona, we have to be really cautious about water conservation because so much of that water is evaporated by the immense heat that we have here. What did you think of, Emily?
So as I mentioned before, in New York, we get hurricanes. So sometimes when hurricanes come by, they erode some of the sand that's at the beach, and the beach gets a lot shorter. And these park rangers have to close down the beaches because they're not safe to swim at. So I thought about how hurricanes affect me during the summer.
Wow, that's really interesting. So then we're going to talk about how weather can have both good and bad effects. First, I'm going to talk about the good. So more rainfall can be no drought, so especially in Arizona, we like it when it rains, we get really excited. And more water for plants and animals to thrive. Cold weather can make sure the animals, like polar bears, have places to live. It'll make sure that the ice is frozen and that they have a large area and habitat to live in. And then also, I don't know if you've ever blown one of those dandelions. Have you ever blown a dandelion and seen the seeds fly off, Emily?
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite things to do during the summer.
Absolutely. Usually wind that's going to carry those seeds. So that's definitely something that can help, that can be helpful. Okay, Emily, do you want to talk about the bad?
Yeah, so along with the good things that weather can affect, there's also some bad effects. So more rainfall can mean devastating floods. So sometimes there's too much rain to be drained and it can flood your backyard or the streets. Also, hot weather can make droughts more likely, and it increases the likelihood of forest fires and can destroy some habitat for cold weather animals like polar bears. Severe wind can uproot trees, which might have the possibility to fall on homes or power lines, and can also even cause floods.
Very scary stuff. So now we're going to talk about how in the last couple decades, our weather is really changing, and we're going to be seeing how that weather is changing in our new environment. The planet is warming, so over the past few decades, the Earth has seen a drastic rise in average temperature per year. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means that we can see more severe droughts in some areas, more rain and snowfall in others. The ice caps in like Antarctica are melting. This is especially bad because it can cause rising sea levels as that water melts. It goes into the ocean, raising the sea levels, which can be more flooding. Fewer species will be able to survive because most animals can only survive in a small range of temperatures. So as the planet warms, that's going to make it harder for them. And we're going to be seeing some more severe storms, which can be pretty scary. So now we just have some final questions to get you thinking. Start thinking about these questions. They'll be answered later. But yeah, here we go. So the first one we want to ask is, why should we care about weather and how weather is changing? Why are you even, taking the time to go through this module? You can flip over your worksheet to the blank spaces on the back and you can start answering these questions if you want, or you can just think about it. It's up to you.
The next question is, why is the weather changing? So all of these changes are happening, but why are they occurring and why do they have such a big impact on us?
And the last question we want to ask is there anything we can do? Is there anything we can do about the climate that's warming, the rising sea levels, or is this just a natural process of the planet? These are questions we're going to be answering later, and we hope that you come back to our next video.
See you soon.
Hi everyone, welcome to our third video. Today we're going to be talking about how do humans affect the environment. Okay, so for starters, we're going to get everyone to get a piece of paper out, and we're going to start off with a brainstorming activity. This is also called a brain dump, so you're just going to write down everything you can think of when we ask the question. So we're going to be asking, how does the environment impact you? So how does your physical surroundings, how does the weather, and things like that affect you? When you have your paper and you're ready to answer the question, pause the video for 2 minutes and come up with as many ways that the environment impacts you. Okay, go. Hopefully you had enough time to pause the video and come up with as many ways that you could think of that the environment impacts you. I'm sure you came up with some really great ideas. I'm going to share what I came up with you. So here it is. So the first one I came up with is where you can live. So if you think about where flooding happens, it would be really hard to live. And you definitely wouldn't want to live somewhere where your home would be in jeopardy of being washed away because of lots of water. And also in other places, where there's no vegetation or a lack of water, that would also be a problem. So that's how the environment can impact where you live. It can also impact like what kind of activities you're able to do. It would be really hard to go swimming when it was really cold outside, when it was snowing. And to the opposite effect, skiing would be really hard if it was, in the summer and 100 degrees and there's no snow. That wouldn't be possible. So certainly the environment is going to impact what kind of activities you get to do. Also, the types of food that can grow. Lots of fruits and vegetables are seasonal, meaning that they are only available at certain times of the year. So that can certainly affect that. And then also allergies, if there's a dust storm or anything like that, that can impact, someone who has allergies, or also, when flowers start blooming, that can also impact your allergies. And these are all how the environment impacts you. So let's switch gears now and let's talk about how you or us, how do we impact the environment? So what actions do we take that are going to impact the environment? So using that same sheet of paper, when you're ready, pause the video and take 2 minutes and come up with as many ways that our actions impact our surroundings and the environment. So when you're ready, take a moment to pause the video and get that done. Hi, and welcome back. So I hope you had enough time to write down as many ideas that you had of how our actions impact the environment. So I'm going to show what I came up with. And the first thing is like the amount of trash you throw away. The amount of trash that we throw away has a big impact on the environment, whether it be how it impacts animals or, trash that gets into waterways. These are all really bad problems. Another one is how much water you use. So in Arizona, it's really important that we conserve as much water as possible because we're in a desert and it's so drought prone. We want to be conscientious of how much water we're using so that doesn't take away from our environment, and that we continue having enough water to drink and things like that. Also, how much energy we use has a big impact on our environment in that energy creates pollution, which is the next bullet point that I came up with. So the pollution are bad things that we release into the environment that have negative effects. We're going to dig deeper into pollution in one of our next videos, so I won't go too deep into that here. A positive one is planting trees. Planting trees can have a positive effect on the environment as trees can take in CO2, which is a hazardous gas that's in the air. Again, we'll talk about that deeper in a later video, but planting trees can have a big effect on the environment. As along with recycling, this goes right along with how much of trash we throw away. Instead of throwing something away, if we can recycle it, that would be a lot better because it doesn't end up in a landfill. So we can see how what our actions do can help or hurt the environment. So we can, make conscious decisions to make sure that we're helping the environment as much as we can. And I think that's something we need to, be conscientious about and focus on. It can be scary hearing all the problems with climate change, but we always have to remember that there are positive things we can do. So instead of making the forests look like the picture on the left, we can make sure that we continue to have strong forests and lots of trees with the picture on the right. So one last brainstorming activity using that same piece of paper. Brainstorm as many ways that you can think of that we can help the environment. This is the end of this video. So once you're done, you can just go on to the next video and we're going to talk about some of the ways that we can help the environment. But first, I want you to get brainstorming on the things that you can do and the ideas that you already have. So awesome. I hope you enjoyed this video and get brainstorming. Hey again, welcome to our new video, and we're going to be talking about the effects of pollution. So if you remember in our last video, we were talking about some of the ways that humans impact the environment, and one of the biggest ways is through the pollution that we create. Not often directly, but often through the things that we purchase, and the actions we take, all have impacts on the amount of pollution that we create. So we're going to be talking about that today, so it's going to be a great video. I hope you tune in. So first, let's talk about what is pollution. And the simplest definition is just it's something bad that is introduced into the environment. So it's going to have a bad effect. Think about if you have an ice cream cone and you drop it and it gets on the ground and it's going to get all this dirt in your ice cream. That the dirt would be seen as pollution because it's going to be bad to your ice cream because you're not going to be able to eat it now. That'd be bad for you. So pollution is something that is introduced to your environment that has a harmful effect. So examples can be car exhaust. So you see the smoke coming out of the back of cars, that's car exhaust, and that is a type of pollution. Then there's sewage, which is a liquid form of pollution that can get into rivers. We have an entire video dedicated to this later. So that's the smoke from the cars. Here's sewage overflow. And then there's also, I'm sure you've heard a lot about plastic straws being really bad for the environment. Really, all plastics are bad for the environment, but certainly straws are one of those problems and something that we need to be mindful of because they're having negative effects on the environment. So this video is mostly going to be concerned with air pollution, which would go under that first category of something like car exhaust, but the sewage overflow is additionally another big issue, just like I said that we have another video dedicated to that. And then also plastic pollution is another big problem, but we're going to be focusing here on air pollution. So, where does air pollution come from? How is it created? A lot of air pollution comes from things like factories. So, when you're manufacturing things like plastics, it's going to create gas pollution to create those items. Also, like I mentioned, from cars, trucks, airplanes, trains, automobiles, things like that, pollution is all coming from those. Also, power plants. We have another video later that's going to be talking about all about energy, which is a big factor in air pollution and why we want to be focusing so much in on that. But then also natural sources such as wildfires, volcanoes, and dust storms all have impacts on the amount of air pollution. So, what are some of the harmful effects of air pollution? So, when these gases from cars or factories go into the air, why is that exactly problematic, and why are we focusing on that in this video? Well, the first concern is for our own personal health. Air pollution can cause things like asthma, allergies, and trouble breathing, which is also called respiratory diseases if you want to get into the fancy science name. So these are all really problematic. So if you have things like allergies or asthma, you know just how hard that is for you and the troubles that come along with that. So decreasing air pollution will definitely help people like that and everyone. Also, climate change. So if you remember all the way back in our introduction video, we briefly introduced climate change. That's the process where our climate is warming and air pollution is having a big effect on that. So CO2, also called carbon dioxide, is one of the gases that is in car exhaust and the type of air pollutions that we are concerned about. And I'm not going to go into the science of why CO2 warms the planet. If you're interested in that, certainly go online and look that up. I think that's a super important topic, but it's not something will be covered in this video. But anyway, so CO2 is warming the climate. And then the warming climate is rising sea levels, also, as we mentioned in that first video. And this is very problematic. So if we look on this big picture on your right, we can see that where in the United States the country is warming, and we can see that all across the United States it is warming at least a little bit, and that is something to be worried about. Certainly, as it's going to be changing weather patterns, raising sea levels, causing floods. It's something that we need to be cautious of. So now that we've learned a little bit about pollution, what it is, and some of the harmful effects and why we need to be focused on it, take out and complete the handout titled Look at Pollution on a Global Scale. It should take you about 5 minutes to complete. So pause this video and come back when you are done with it. Awesome. Go to it. Hi, I hope you had enough time to pause the video and complete this handout. So you were tasked to look up how much pollution your country creates and how does that rank with other countries. So be thinking about, do you think your country is doing a good job on pollution? You get to have the task of being a teacher, or what teachers usually do. They get to grade, your students' work, homework, and things like that. Well, I want you to grade how you think your country is doing. So, give them an A if your country is not polluting a lot, a B, C, or D if they're somewhere in the middle, or an F if they're at the very top of the list, in the top 5 countries of how much they're polluting. So I live in Arizona in the United States. I would give the United States an F for how much they're polluting, which is why all of us should be concerned with how much pollution we are creating. I think this video is so important and that we all need to take actions to decrease the amount of pollution. What can you do to decrease the air pollution output? These are some ideas that I came up with. There are tons out there, so don't take this as a list of this is everything that you can do. Come up with your own unique ideas, but these are just some quick ideas that I thought of that might be helpful for all of you in trying to decrease how much you're polluting. So first, try biking or walking, or if you have a neighbor that goes to your same school, try carpooling to school. This is going to decrease, the amount of time you're using a vehicle and also how much air pollution you're putting out. So all three of those things would be great. Also, as we previously mentioned, planting trees is really helpful. It decreases the amount of carbon dioxide, CO2, which is one of those bad gases for air pollution that we talked about. Also, eating less meat. That'll decrease pollution. Using reusable materials. So instead of buying one of those flimsy water bottles every time you're thirsty, have a reusable water bottle that you can take with you instead of, wasting those plastic water bottles. Buy used items instead of new whenever you can. Use less energy. So we have a whole nother video on that is going to be coming up in a few videos. So stay tuned to that. I won't get into too much of that right here. But now on the back of your handout that you just completed, create an action plan. So, right, I am going to decrease the amount of pollution I'm creating by, and then enter what you're going to do. So this is going to be different for all of you, whichever, fits your lifestyle the most. If it's, really easy to, bike or walk to school instead of having your parents drive you, certainly you can write that, or planting trees in your neighborhood, anything like that is going to decrease the amount of air pollution, and it's going to make our environment healthier, all of us healthier, and it's going to hopefully decrease the climate change that is happening to our Earth. So thank you for tuning into this video. We have a bunch of great videos coming up after this, so stay tuned. Thank you.
Hi friends! So in this video, we're going to be talking about air pollution. And specifically, we're going to be talking about air pollution in the city of Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh has a really long history with air pollution as an industrial city where we used to be known for making steel and having all these factories. And back in the day, in the 1900s, the air pollution used to be so bad that you could see it in the air. And you can't always see air pollution, but back in the mid-1900s, there used to be a thick smog through the city. And a smog is a fog or haze combined with smoke and other atmospheric pollutants that make it difficult to see and make it more cloudy in the air. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures to show how bad air pollution in Pittsburgh used to be. The first picture was taken in 1940, and when you look at it first, it kind of looks like a foggy day and it looks like it's nighttime. This picture was actually taken at noon, and the smog was so thick that it made it look like nighttime, and the city had to keep the streetlights on. The second picture is a picture of Mellon Institute today. This is a building that Carnegie Mellon has, and you can see that the columns look kind of dirty. This dirt is left there on purpose and is what buildings all around Pittsburgh used to look like. The dirt is actually soot that came from these industrial plants and the air pollution in the air and made all of the buildings in Pittsburgh a little dirty. And it's left as a reminder of Pittsburgh's past with air pollution. We've come a long way in making air quality in the region better. We've made sure that factories and industrial plants don't pollute the air as much, so there's not a thick smog all around the city anymore. But that doesn't mean that just because we can't see it, that there isn't air pollution in the city. Pittsburgh still has one of the worst air qualities in the country. And there's no single cause to Pittsburgh's poor air quality, but a majority of the air pollution in the region comes from industrial plants that still exist. So what can we do as normal residents to help reduce air pollution? Well, the first thing we can do is we can make sure that we don't heavily contribute to the air pollution by reducing how much we drive. So if we're going somewhere close by and we don't have to carry a lot of stuff, instead of driving, maybe we could walk or bike. We can also plant trees and make sure that we're not needlessly cutting down trees that don't need to be cut down. Trees act as natural filters in the environment, and they help clean the air so it's safer to breathe. They take in all of the bad air, and they filter it and release clean oxygen. And finally, we can also help report when we notice that the air quality is particularly bad on any day. Air quality can change from day to day depending on the weather and operation of nearby industrial plants. And even though we can't always see the air pollution, sometimes we can smell it. We can smell it because these are products of these industrial plants, and sometimes you might notice that it smells like rotten eggs outside. This is actually a product of industrial pollution, and what you're smelling is actually hydrogen sulfide. Friends at Carnegie Mellon created a way for residents to report the air pollution wherever and whenever throughout Allegheny County. So if you want to take out your handout called Pittsburgh Pollution, we're going to go check out this application and we can try it for ourselves. So to look at the Smell Pittsburgh application in our web browser, we're going to type in smellpgh.org. And that's going to bring us to the website that our friends at Carnegie Mellon made. And there are these different tabs on how the application works. But for right now, let's just look at the Visualization tab. The Visualization tab will bring you to a map. On this map, you'll see different triangles of different colors and circles. On the bottom, you'll also see that there are rectangles with dates on them, and all these rectangles are different shades of gray. These rectangles represent different days of air quality reports, and the lighter the color, the better the average air quality report was. The darker the rectangle, the worse the average air quality reports are. The triangles on the map represent individual air quality reports made by people like you and me. Since this is Smell Pittsburgh, the air quality reports are reported by smell. So when people like you and me don't smell anything in the air, they'll put in a green triangle. But when they smell really strong smells of air pollution or like rotten eggs, they'll put in these deep red air quality symbols. The circles represent air quality reports made by official stations, and the arrows connected to them represent the wind direction of the time of their reports. On this day, you can see that it was pretty bad air quality. There are a lot of deep red triangles along with orange and lighter orange. But outside of the city, people reported better air quality. Now that I've explained how Smell Pittsburgh works, why don't you try it on your own? Look at the different daily smell readings using the bar at the bottom, or pick any day using the calendar feature right on the top left. You can also zoom in and zoom out and look at specific air quality reports from where you live. On your handout, Pollution in Pittsburgh, write down any observations you find. Have fun! Another really important part of pollution in Pittsburgh is looking at water pollution. Since Pittsburgh is surrounded by 3 rivers, the Allegheny River, the Monongahela River, and the Ohio River, any pollution that happens on our streets ends up washing into our rivers. These rivers are really important to anyone or anything that lives in Pittsburgh because it's where a lot of us hang out or spend time with our friends and families. It's also where a lot of different animals and vegetation live. And finally, it's where we get our clean drinking water from. So it's important to know how our rivers are being polluted and how to reduce any pollution that goes into our rivers. There are 2 main types of pollution. There's point source pollution and non-point source pollution. And these different types of pollution describe how pollution is getting into our rivers. Point source pollution is pollution that goes into our bodies of water from an identifiable source. So that could be a factory or a waste pipe. Non-point source pollution is pollution that comes from a bunch of different avenues. So that could be runoff, where rainwater is collecting pollutants from our streets and washing into our rivers, or it could be how people dump things into the water from different locations. So now we're going to look at how point source pollution and non-point source pollution impact bodies of water differently and how they impact them in the same way. On your same Pittsburgh pollution handout, on the second page, there's instructions on this demo, but I'm also going to show you how this demonstration works right now. So let's go. Pause this video. Before we do this together, read the procedure on your own or with an adult and make a prediction on the end results. Hi everyone, so in this experiment, we're going to be looking at the difference between point source pollution and non-point source pollution. And these 2 different types of pollution just describe where our pollutants are coming from in our bodies of water. So for this experiment, we're going to need 2 identical containers. I'm using these Tupperware containers, but you can use bowls or takeout containers or anything that can really hold water. We're also going to use food coloring. I'm using brown, but you can use any color. You could also use any strong colored juice, and that's going to act as our pollutant. We're also going to need tape and a pen so that we can mark which container is non-point source pollution and which container is point source pollution. And we're going to use a plastic water bottle to act as a rain simulator. And at the top, we're going to have an adult poke holes into it so it can act as rain. And your adult can use a push pin or a pen or scissors to make these holes at the top so that it sprays water like this. So in our 2 containers, I've marked them with a piece of tape and a marker to label them NP and P. And these are going to act as our bodies of water. The NP is going to be our non-point source pollution, and the P is going to be our point source pollution. And in these bodies of water, I've covered the bottom with a little bit of water, and this is going to act as our non-polluted water. I've also had an adult poke the holes in my water bottle so that it will act as rain, and I'm going to mark about a quarter of the way down with a Sharpie to mark our rain levels. That way we have equal rain levels in each parts of our experiment. And it's okay if you fill this water bottle a little bit more or a little bit less with water, but I'm going to fill it up that much. So we're going to start with our non-point source pollution. Non-point source pollution is pollution that comes from a bunch of different areas, whether it be runoff from the streets or acid rain or runoff from farms or agricultural areas. What we're going to do is we're going to fill this water bottle with a little bit of pollutant. So I have my food dye here, and I'm going to add 2 drops of food dye into this bottle. And it's important that you remember how many drops you add. That way you can have the same amount of pollutant in your non-point source pollution and your point source pollution. So now that I have my pollutant in here, I'm going to fill it up to this line with water. And I filled mine a little bit under the line, but that's okay, as long as you're close. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to swirl it to make sure that it's all mixed up. And it's important that you don't shake the water bottle because of the holes in here. If you shake it, you're going to get pollutant all over your counter. You might want to do this either in a sink or in a tub or put a towel down. I have paper towels here, so I'm just going to clean up any mess that I have. But you should ask a parent where the best place to do this is. So now that I have my non-point source pollution, I'm going to pour it into this container, and it's going to act as runoff and rain that has pollutants in it, like wastewater or waste from agriculture or pollutants from cars. And I'm just going to have it rain all in here, and I'm spilling a little bit, so I'm going to clean that up. You can see that now our body of water is really polluted. It has all of this gunk that came from the sewers or cars or factories, and that ran off into our body of water like the river. So now we're going to do our point source pollution. And to start with this, we're going to clean out our water bottle so that it doesn't have any more of this icky pollutant in it. So I cleaned out my water bottle and I filled it back up to the line with clean water. I'm going to drop the same number of food dye drops that I put in my water for the non-point source pollution into this container. This is going to be point source pollution. So this pollution is pollution that comes straight from a single source, like a factory or an outpipe of a sewer plant or a treatment plant. And you can see that it's all in just one area. And now with our rain simulator, we're going to pour the same amount of rain we poured in that first experiment with the non-point source pollution. And we're just going to spray it all throughout the body of water. So initially, you can see that there are definitely areas where it's more polluted than others. But with the event of the rain, you can see that it really mixed the pollutants all around the body of water. And we're going to come back in 5 to 10 minutes to compare it to the non-point source pollution. So what do you think the bodies of water will look like after 10 minutes? Do you think they'll both look polluted, or do you think they'll look different? Don't forget to write down your observations as you go. So after about 10 minutes, we see that the non-point source pollution and the point source pollution bodies of water look very similar. Like before, the non-point source pollution body of water is well mixed and the entire thing is polluted. In the point source pollution, it's mixed a lot more with the rest of the water, but there are still some areas that are more polluted than others. In both cases, we see that the entire body of water is impacted, even though in the point source pollution we saw a tiny area impacted initially,
over time, with rain events and with the currents of the bodies of water, we see that the whole body of water gets impacted, just like in the non-point source pollution, where it comes from a bunch of different avenues all around and it impacts the whole body.
Now that we've seen that point source pollution and non-point source pollution impact our bodies of water, like the rivers in Pittsburgh, very similarly, we know that wherever pollution comes from, it's not good for our environment. And we can remember what Caillou taught us in our first couple videos, that pollution is an introduction of harmful materials into our environment. In the next couple videos, I'll be talking about how pollution specifically enters our environment in Pittsburgh, ways that you and I can help reduce pollution in Pittsburgh, and how institutions like Carnegie Mellon are helping to reduce our pollution as well. I'll see you then.
Hi, Emily. Now that we've talked about water pollution, I have a question. Do you ever wonder where the water goes after you flush the toilet?
That's a great question, Caillou. Can you guys think about what happens to the water after you flush the toilet? Take a few seconds to think about it. Maybe pause this video, and once you think about it, come back to this video. So what do you think happens, Caillou?
Well, I had always just assumed that it just disappeared after you flush the toilet. Is that not what happens?
Well, flushed toilet water is considered wastewater, like what we talked about before. In Pittsburgh, all the wastewater goes into sewer pipes, which gets treated and cleaned so it's safe for them to put it back into the rivers. But first, all of that wastewater has to get to the treatment plant. So let's check out this online simulator that I found called Follow the Flush. It's made by Alcasan, which is the Allegheny County Sanitary Authority, and they're in charge of cleaning all of the wastewater before it's returned back to our rivers.
Can we see how the wastewater flushed from Carnegie Mellon travels to the treatment plant?
Sure.
So to find the Flush It tool, in our search engine, we're going to write Flush It Alcasan. And we're going to type that in, and then we'll press enter. The first link that says Flush It Interactive Tracing Tool by Three Rivers Wet Weather, we're going to click that. And you'll see that the tool comes in an embedded version, but what we're going to do is we're going to click this link so we can see it in full screen. And in the full screen tool, you'll see that Allegheny County is highlighted in blue. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so we see the city of Pittsburgh a little better. And this little dot over here is the Alcasan treatment plant. In this dial-up log, we're going to write where we want to flush from. So I'm going to put in Carnegie Mellon University. And I'm going to click that address and I'm going to press enter. And it'll take a little bit of time to flush. So while we're waiting, why don't you think about how long you think it takes for your water from your toilet to reach the treatment plant all the way at the Alcasan Treatment Center. And also think about how far of a distance you think that your water travels. Also, on the bottom, sometimes there are fun facts. So this one is Alcasan was created in 1946. After a while, your flush will come up and you'll see how far your flush travels. So from Carnegie Mellon, it takes 11.43 miles to get to the treatment facility. It also takes from 8 hours to 17 hours. That's almost your entire day that you're up. These little neighborhoods that are highlighted in orange are all the neighborhoods that your water flows through in our sewage pipes in the different neighborhoods in Pittsburgh to get to the treatment center. Once you exit out, you'll see the path that your sewage will take to get to the treatment plant. You can see that this one snakes around, but mostly follows the river until it gets to the Alcasan Treatment Center. Now, on your own, try the Flush It simulator, putting in your own home address or your school or any other location in Allegheny County that you want to see where their flush goes after you flush the toilet.
Isn't the Follow the Flush simulator cool? I didn't know how far wastewater traveled or how long it took to get from our homes all the way to the wastewater treatment plants. In older cities like Boston, New York, and Pittsburgh, our wastewater travels in combined sewers. And these are systems that are designed to collect domestic sewage like the wastewater from our homes, industrial wastewater, and collect rainwater, all in the same pipe. And while this is an effective and efficient way for all of this water to travel to the treatment plant in one pipe, it also poses a risk to overflow.
This is called combined sewer overflow and is an environmental issue in older cities like Pittsburgh, Boston, and New York City. Combined sewer overflow happens in rain events when too much rainwater is added to the storm pipes and they end up flooding back into our streets. But not just the rainwater floods into our streets. It's a mix of the rainwater and all of the wastewater that's collected in those pipes. This can be harmful to people and the environment because we shouldn't interact with wastewater before it's been properly treated. So when events of combined sewer overflow happen, the water that floods into our streets eventually ends up flooding into our bodies of water, like the rivers in Pittsburgh. And this is a big contribution to water pollution in the city. In previous videos, we've talked about how climate change impacts us. And in Pittsburgh, we see that climate change has led to more intense storms happening more frequently. So even though it might not rain more, the storms that happen very intensely happen more frequently. This shows how in an intense storm, it'll rain the same amount, but it'll happen much quicker. We can see it happen again here, where the normal storm has the same amount of droplets, but it takes longer for that pool at the bottom to fill up. It's been found that instead of about 8 intense storms, we have 13 to 20 a year. That's more than double the amount of intense rainstorms that happen every year. In Pittsburgh, we see that if it rains more than 2 inches in 24 hours, there's a high risk of combined sewer overflow occurring. In our next video, we'll be looking at how combined sewer overflow really works in regular rainstorms and in intense rainstorms. So on the handout that says how climate change affects Pittsburgh, read the procedures and try to start on your own or predict what might happen. I'll see you then. To understand how combined sewers work and the difference between a regular storm and an intense storm and what contributes to combined sewer overflow, let's do a hands-on demonstration. Let's take out that handout that says climate change in Pittsburgh at the top, and let's go through this demonstration together. Come on.
So for this experiment, we're going to be looking at what happens in combined sewer overflow. Combined sewer overflow is when our combined sewers spill over into our streets during rain events. So for this experiment, we're going to need a container that you can poke holes into. So I've poked holes into the bottom of the side so that I can place it down in my sink or in my bathtub and still have water come out of it. I'm using a plastic container, but you could also use like a plastic cup or any other plastic container that your adult doesn't mind having holes at the bottom of it. And make sure that an adult makes these holes. I used a drill, but you can also use a scissor or something like that, and just make sure that the holes are pretty small. We're also going to need a large pitcher that's bigger than our container. This container is going to act as our pipe system, and this is going to act as our rain. I'm using a pitcher, but you can use a big bowl or a big measuring cup or a pot, as long as it's bigger than your pipe system container. So let's get started. Pittsburgh has combined sewer systems, which means that our pipes that carry our wastewater from our homes, schools, and offices to the wastewater treatment plant also catch stormwater when it rains. With climate change, our storms are getting more and more intense, even if they have the same volume of water. They just happen in a shorter amount of time. So we're going to show what happens to our combined sewers. We're going to test it in 2 scenarios. In both scenarios, we're going to fill this pitcher with water, and we're going to have our container with the holes at the bottom. And we're going to place our container on the bottom of our sink. In the first experiment, what we're going to do is we're just going to pour this water pretty slowly into our storm container. And you're going to see that we're pouring it slowly, and we're also seeing that water is coming out of the holes that we made. And this might take a while. Maybe you want to have a parent help you pour, but just make sure that you're pouring pretty slowly and you see that the water is coming out of the bottom and is flowing into the top. This is a typical storm where it's only raining a little bit for a long period of time. It's like a drizzle. In these storms, because we're pouring slowly and because they happen over a long period of time, the sewers are starting to fill up, but they have enough time to get rid of the water that they're collecting. These little holes at the bottom we're going to call outputs, and this is our input. So we can see that our input is a little faster than our output, but the volume in our container or our pipe is enough to keep it from overflowing because our storm isn't that intense. So you can see that it filled all the way up. We started when it was empty, but the volume of the pipe was enough so that it wouldn't overflow because our storm was slow. And I'm just gonna let this empty out, but you can also just pour it out, and we're gonna try the next one. So now that we've seen what a typical storm looks like, we're gonna look at an intense storm due to climate change. So I've filled my pipe with our little bit of food coloring, which you don't have to do, and I have my pitcher filled with water. So since we're only pouring one pitcher in both scenarios, it's the same volume of water. But with an intense storm, what we're gonna do is we're gonna pour this as fast as we can into our pipes. And let's see what happens. Be careful though, it might get a little messy. See, what happens here is that our storm is so intense that our output isn't enough to drain the pipes fast enough, and the pipe fills with storm water even though it has some wastewater in it, and it overflows. This is what happens in combined sewer overflow. When the storms are so intense, the pipes overflow into our streets, and it's a mix of rainwater and this polluted wastewater before it's had a chance to be treated. And that runs into our streets and eventually runs off into our rivers and pollutes our rivers when we have these cases of combined sewer overflow.
Combined sewer overflow and water pollution seem really scary. There are things that we can do to help reduce the risk of it happening so frequently. In the next video, I'll be talking about solutions to reduce the risk of flooding in Pittsburgh and ways that Carnegie Mellon is doing this. But before that, talk with your family or write on the back of the handout and try to come up with your own solutions. I'll see you then.
Hi friends! Since our last video, I hope you thought about ways that we could reduce pollution in Pittsburgh and how we as citizens can reduce the risk of combined sewer overflow in the city. Some things that we can do as citizens is to make sure that we're never dumping litter or waste outside. This litter or waste can actually clog up our combined sewer system and make it harder for the water to get through, making it more likely for water to overflow into our streets. Another thing we can do is that we can make sure that we're planting plants and have green spaces all around the city. These green spaces and plants act to absorb the water when it rains before it actually reaches our stormwater system. This is called a stormwater management practice, and these practices are all around the city. Carnegie Mellon has actually been doing stormwater management projects and practices for over 10 years now, and we have a lot of projects all throughout campus that are used specifically to make sure that water is being collected and reused instead of making its way to our combined sewer systems and reducing the risk of combined sewer overflow. So let's go around Carnegie Mellon's campus and see what these stormwater management practices really are. Come on.
Hi friends! Right now I'm outside of Carnegie Mellon University, and let's go look at all of the stormwater management systems that we have around campus. So right outside of the Cohen University Center on Carnegie Mellon's campus, we have these rain gardens. There's one here, and there's one here. And these act as pools to collect rainwater during storms. So in these rain gardens, there are a lot of different levels. So you see there's a step here, here, and then down there. And this acts as like a pool. So when it rains, all of the water comes here, and then there's a little drain right over there. You can see it. And what happens is when the water pools, the vegetation here uses that water to grow, and that way the water comes into these rain gardens and is used here instead of being put into the streets or on the sidewalks. Eventually, the water here also drains into what we call a cistern. A cistern is like a big tank, and what happens is this water gets filtered and is used for non-drinkable water in our Cohen University Center. It's used in the toilets and the cooling systems in the building, so we don't have to use fresh water. I'm outside of the Gates-Hillman Center, which is home to the School of Computer Science. And the roof collects rainwater in the building's own cistern and uses this rainwater to fill the toilets and use in the cooling system, just like at the Cohen University Center. So they don't have to use clean water for these non-drinkable, non-digestible water sources throughout the building. So you might notice on the Gates-Hillman complex building that there are plants growing on the roof. And we don't normally see plants growing on buildings. We usually see them growing in parks or in soil. But this is a really great stormwater management practice that we have all around campus, and they're called green roofs. Green roofs are a great way to use vegetation to help collect stormwater during rain events instead of just using cisterns and gutters. This way, the plants filter the water when it rains and it collects it. And we also get a lot of the benefits from having vegetation nearby, such as cleaner air and reduced heat island effect, where pavement and sidewalks tend to make cities hotter because it just captures all of the heat from the sun and doesn't reflect as well. But these plants help to control the temperature a little better. So let's go check out some more green roofs other than at the Gates-Hillman complex. Let's go. Here at Doherty Hall, we can see a green roof where there are a bunch of plants on the roof that can be used to collect the rainwater. The rain will be used to water these plants. So this is another green roof on Hammerschlag Hall. And you can see over here that there are different layers. There's some soil, and there's smaller rocks, and then bigger rocks, and then there's vegetation. And all of these different layers help to filter out the water before it gets put into cisterns within the building to be used for their cooling systems. This is really important that we're filtering our water so that we get some of the pollutants out and we get other things that might have ended up in the water, whether it be waste, wrappers, or little particles and things like that, so we can use the water in our cooling systems without damaging them. On the surrounding buildings like Wien Hall, Doherty Hall, Baker Hall, Porter Hall, and even Hammerschlag, where the downspouts of these buildings all connect to the cisterns underneath this grass. These cisterns help to filter the water and then bring them back to all of these surrounding buildings to be used in the cooling systems, just like in Gates-Hillman Complex and the Cohen University Center. This is really important because the water in cooling systems, you don't need clean water for. And to clean water is a very expensive, time-consuming, and energy-consuming process. So by using this reclaimed water, where we're taking it from the rain and using it in our cooling systems, we don't have to do that really long and energy-consuming process. It helps the environment, and it also helps to make sure that our campus and the surrounding streets don't flood during rain events. So this downspout kind of looks like one you probably have at home or at school, where it connects to the roof and the rain comes all the way down. And usually what happens is that it ends up right here, and at the end it will go onto your grass. But instead, because these downspouts are connecting to the cistern, they actually connect all the way underground. And down here, there's a pipe system that feeds down here and leads into the cistern tanks that are right on this hill over here on the Academic Mall. Isn't that cool? So now that we've seen stormwater management systems on Carnegie Mellon's campus, we can review why this is so important. In urbanized areas or areas that are more developed, we don't have a lot of space where water can be absorbed into the grass or into the forest or into fields as much as you do in the country or in rural areas. So what happens is the water can't penetrate the paved areas like sidewalks and roads, and it ends up flooding and running off into our rivers, carrying all of the chemicals that are left on our streets and sidewalks. There's also a risk to flood our buildings and our homes. So by having these stormwater management systems, we're able to reduce the risk of flooding, and we're also able to collect this water and reuse it in our buildings in areas where we're not going to ingest the water, like in cooling systems or in our toilets. Cleaning water and using clean water is a very time-consuming and very energy-consuming process because we have to filter out all the bad stuff like waste and chemicals that we can't ingest. But there are also some things that you can do at home that don't involve installing giant cisterns in your backyard or turning your roof into a green roof. You can make sure that you have plants outside so that when it does rain, instead of going onto the pavement or your building, it can go into your plants and it can collect that water. You can also make sure that you're not dumping things into the streets so that when it does rain and it does run off into our sewers and our rivers, that we're not polluting. So never dump anything out on the street or on the sidewalk or even in your backyard.
Isn't Carnegie Mellon so cool? We have so many different ways that we're collecting rainwater and reusing it all around campus. And with every new building and new project we have, we're having more and more stormwater management practices put in place. Now that we've seen some stormwater management practices on Carnegie Mellon's campus, in our next video, we're going to do an activity where we look at green spaces and stormwater management practices around where we live. I'll see you then. Hi guys! Now that we've talked about stormwater management practices on Carnegie Mellon's campus, let's do an activity where we look at green spaces near us. Green spaces are areas that have any vegetation or plants, like parks, gardens, and front and backyards. And these areas are used not only for looks, they also are used to help collect rainwater so it doesn't all go into our storm systems. So for this activity, we're going to need colored pencils or crayons or markers, and we're going to look at green spaces near us. So let's take out that handout called Green Spaces Near Me, and at the top, before we get started, take a few seconds to pause this video and think about the stormwater management practices that we've already talked about. Now that we've rethought about some of the stormwater management practices near us, let's get started with the activity.
So first I drew out a map of a couple of blocks around me, but you can have an adult print out a Google Map image. So first I'm drawing out all of the roads. Roads are made out of pavement, and they're what we call impermeable. This means that water can't soak through them, and that the water ends up flowing down into our combined sewers. So here I'm drawing all of the places where water won't penetrate the ground and will end up in our combined sewers. Next, I started drawing out all of the green spaces that I saw on Google Maps. If you're using a printed out version, you can just color it in green. These green spaces are parks, front yards, backyards, and even some trees that I saw nearby. In these areas, this is where rainwater will be collected and will soak into the ground or will be used by plants to grow. This means that this water won't go into our combined sewers. And there are a lot of houses near me, so there are a lot of front yards, but they're pretty tiny. There are some areas where there are a bunch of backyards connected together, and that's what these larger green spaces are. By having green spaces all around us, like yards and parks, we're able to reduce the amount of water that goes into our combined sewer system. And that way, less water is going into them, and there's a lower risk of combined sewer overflow occurring. Now that I've mapped out all the things that exist, I also took a walk and looked for places where I saw storm drains. Those are those grates that you see on the ground, and that's where stormwater is going to enter and go into our combined sewers. I didn't walk all around, so these are only some of the ones that I saw. Next, I'm going to draw things that I want to add so that my area around me has less chance of combined sewer overflow happening. So here I drew more trees. This is where I would want to plant trees. Next, I'm drawing these red boxes with plants in them. These are roofs that I see around me. So on my house and on the CVS nearby and some of the apartment buildings that are near me, if I had the chance, I would add green roofs to these areas. These areas have really large rooftops and to me seem like a perfect place to put a green roof so that they can collect water instead of ending up in my gutters. Next, I'm drawing more trees all around. Like we learned earlier, not only do trees collect rainwater and reduce the amount of water that's going into our sewer system, trees also act as a natural filter, and they help to take the polluted air and clean it before releasing clean oxygen. Next, I'm just adding these flowers in areas where there might not be enough space for trees, but I think that plants could grow. And I'm adding one more tree over here. Now you try.
Hi everyone, welcome to our video all about energy. As promised, here's our video that's going to talk about energy use and why we need to be conscientious of our energy use. Okay, so let's first get started talking about how is energy created. So we're not going to talk about specifically about how the energy is created, but the products that are used to create energy. And energy is created with either non-renewable energy sources or renewable energy sources. And the difference between these two are non-renewable energy sources, they are in limited supply. So once we use it up, there is no more. And renewable energy sources are things that we have ample supply of, unlimited amounts on Earth, that we don't have to worry about running out. So those non-renewable energy sources, also called fossil fuels, can be coal, petroleum, or natural gas, while the renewable energy sources are wind, water, and solar. So these are all things that can be used to create energy. Some are in limited supply, so once we run out of coal, there's no more, and we can't create more. So what are the problems with fossil fuels? So much of the world energy is created by, burning coal, oil, or natural gas. Why is this a problem, and why are we talking about it so much? As we mentioned earlier in our previous pollution video, we talked about how energy usage creates pollution, and that pollution is created from the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas. So they're creating carbon dioxide, which is released into the air, as if you remember, is contributing to climate change and all kinds of health problems as well. And then also, they're non-renewable. So once we run out of them, we're going to have less energy to work with, and that's going to be a problem for communities all across the world. This is a big problem. Well, what can we do about it? So a common theme throughout all of our videos is, yes, there are bad things happening to our environment, but there are always things that we can do. So one thing, using solar power, wind turbines, or other renewable energy sources is much better than fossil fuels to power our cities and would have much less carbon emissions. But not all of us, can just go out and start, using our energy that only comes from solar power or wind turbines. That's not something we can all do, but something we all can do is using less energy. Right now, I want you to pause the video and complete the handout that's titled, How Much Energy Do You Use? I think this is going to be really interesting on what you guys come up with. So pause the video and come back once you finish that. Hi everyone, I hope you had enough time to complete that handout and come up with how many units of energy you use. So in the last question we asked, how many burritos of energy do you use? And of course, none of us know, how much energy is used to create a burrito, but know that it's not a small amount. The numbers I have shown to you on your screen are the amount that the average American will use in a year. So the amount of energy that an American uses in a single year is equivalent to 31,226 burritos. Now, I know it's funny to be thinking about, energy in terms of burritos or dynamite or coal, but just makes it so much more relatable. No one could ever eat 31,226 burritos. That is a lot of burritos. Or dynamite, you think of those big explosions that dynamite makes. Well, the amount of energy we use is equivalent to 165,000 of those sticks of dynamite, or 15,370 pounds of coal. This is a lot of energy. And if we focus in on that coal example, so we are each using the equivalent of 15,370 pounds of coal. All that coal is creating pollution that's going into the environment, and that is problematic. So that's why we want to be talking about, how are we going to decrease the amount of energy that we're using? So let's create an action plan. An action plan is a plan that you're going to take in your future to decrease the amount of energy that you use. And I think it's going to be one of the best things that come out of following through our videos and our module is you're going to have a plan. You're going to be able to decrease your pollution, your energy usage, which is going to be great for our environment. So on the back of your how much energy do I use handout, start a sentence by writing, I am going to use less energy by, and then finish the sentence with one of the actions that you're going to take. So I came up with a few actions that you can take to use less energy, but whatever you come up with is completely valid. This is, a very short list of just some things that I came up with that I try to do, but don't take this as this is all you can do. Come up with as many unique ideas that you can come up with. So the first one is, always remember to turn off the lights when you leave a room. There's no point in lighting an empty room and all that energy, you're just wasting. So remember to turn off the lights. Instead of, using the energy of watching a TV, go outside, play in the sun. Those are all great things that you can do. Also, if you are hot, instead of turning on the AC, try using a fan first. These are all really simple, easy actions that we can all take that take, virtually no time to complete. And they will end up decreasing the amount of energy we use so we can save the burritos, the dynamite, and especially the coal. So that is all that we had for you through our video series about different topics. We have one more conclusion video that's going to talk about what we hope you learned from this video, so I hope you tune into that next video. But I hope you've enjoyed learning about energy today. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So this is the end of our module, Thinking Green, and we hope you had a lot of fun. I know I had a lot of fun.
Me too.
Caillou, what was your favorite part of the module?
My favorite part was the fact that students were able to create an action plan to make sure that they're using less energy and less pollution to have less impact on the environment. What about you, Emily?
Yeah, I think that was my favorite part too. I'm really excited to work towards completing my action plan and helping my family members make action plans too.
Awesome.
So there are a few things that we also hope that you took away from Thinking Green. We hope that you can now identify why the environment is changing and identify why the environment is important to you.
Absolutely, as well as to make sure that you can take actions to decrease your impact on the environment and give examples of ways Pittsburgh is combating climate change.
We'd also like to thank Carnegie Mellon University and the Leonard Gelfand Center for helping us to make this module and bring it to you.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for watching our videos. We hope you had as much fun as we did.
Thanks again for joining us in this module, and remember that your actions can help impact the environment. So remember to always think and act green.
See ya!
See ya!